I want to welcome everyone to a very special edition of AI Insiders. And you might notice that it includes a new logo. And I got to make sure to frame the camera right. But AI Marketers Guild by Marketecture, as we had a very special event publicized this week. I remembered, like, yeah, I mean, what better way to celebrate than actually injuring myself with a champagne bottle during a live Zoom call, as we found out.
Nice.
But I am, uh, yeah. So for those who saw the LinkedIn post and some of the other notes, and I know most of you have seen something by now, but I mean, Ari and I met in 2003. New York New Media Association, NINMA. I mean, they had these pink slip parties, and ooh, there we go. Uh, uh, it's like also last night it was so great. This is like for those who are like parents or caretakers in some ways, where I'm like spending all day responding to this wonderful outpouring on LinkedIn or other channels, and then like my daughter's home and she needs to eat and has these all kinds of ideas for how she wants to destroy the kitchen, and I'm putting the phone down and dealing with some more important things like dinner, but I'm like, yeah, I didn't get to really raise the glass properly. So, and most importantly is like all of this is because of the incredible people who come through this room virtually or these rooms in person. And it's like, yeah, how do we do more together? How do we have more resources and a bigger platform to do what we're doing? And and I'm excited to introduce Eric Caparo, who's the founder and CEO of Marketecture. We've got Jeremy Bloom. We've got AdTech God here, who you might not actually hear from today, but God's spirit is with us, and their presence is felt. And it's just and this is just the thing where like writing FAQ was so much fun because it was basically like that's not changing, that's not changing, we're still and oh, you know what, like Ari actually wants to make sure I'm spending time building a marketers guild, building serial marketers, and now I have even a better excuse to spend time doing it. And just like the three of them have been incredible. So thanks everyone here. Ari, Jeremy, AdTech God, couldn't be more excited to now get to collaborate with you on all this, and welcome to our community too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David. And nice to meet those I don't know on this call. And I'm glad to be part of the community. And, I'm pretty excited about it because I think, to be totally obvious, AI is pretty important to marketing moving forward. But also it's confusing and complicated. And so it's amazing that you folks have organized yourself into this community where you can share and learn together and not necessarily be on the tail end of a blast of promotional stuff and other things that maybe aren't as helpful. David, as he said, he and I have known each other for an extremely long time. NINMA is lost to the pages of history. I think I still have a T-shirt I sometimes use at the gym, which is probably worth something. But it was a great organization for the .com bubble. And now we're in a very modern, changing environment. So, I don't know, David, you could lead the agenda, but I can talk about, Marketecture, about what our plans are. We can talk about AI. We can talk about a lot of things.
Well, I'm excited to talk about all of this, and thanks for the great messages coming in here, and this whole multi-channel and surround sound approach of it's great to see. And also, I mean, the reason why Marketecture is the right fit is because I've had a lot of respect for it and all of you, but just seeing that outpouring of like this is like the chocolate and peanut butter of partnerships and acquisitions and everything. And so but one thing, like, yeah, The past 24 hours especially have been a whirlwind. Are there questions that anyone has about the news? Anything you want to make sure that we cover today? I'll have a lot of questions for Ari, and tee up a few things more about.
I love what you said about doing the FAQ. Right, that's not changing. That's not changing. That's not. I mean, that's a really visceral reaction to the actual connection itself. So maybe the question is, what is changing, in the good way, and maybe even in not a bad way, but in a ways that you weren't expecting. So a little bit more of what should we be expecting, and how can we follow along and raise the flag like we always have been.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things I'm most excited about is access. Like seriously, like some of the folks who were adding me on LinkedIn yesterday, who I could tell are coming from the Marketecture side, and now want to make sure to keep tabs. Like all these people who I have like 100 to 700 mutual connections with, and I'm like, oh, these folks are awesome. And now, they're getting a taste of what's going on in our world. One of the things we really liked too was that even before taking a look at the actual audience and email addresses and things like that, we all knew that most of the Marketecture world wasn't paying attention to what's going on in this front, and not enough of our people realize, like, I know a lot of you are Marketecture fans here, but not enough realize like the breadth and depth of everything that Ari and Jeremy and AdTech.ATG and even this broader network are covering. I mean, this is Ari, this is your sixth acquisition, right?
In the past 12 months, yeah. Why don't I tell a little story here, because it's a little some of you. We may have assumed everyone knows who I am, who Mark is.
Yeah, but because that was one of the things I want to do. Like, who are you? What is Marketecture?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you the honest truth, which is, I have a long experience in ad tech. I'm really an ad tech guy. And, don't hold that against me. It's just where I come from. So I was at Google and AppNexus in leadership roles. And I founded Beeswax, which got sold to Comcast. I found myself after Comcast saying to myself, what do you do now? Do you want to do another ad tech company? You want to do something else? And the train of logic went sort of like, I don't want to do ad tech, but it would be a shame to lose all my ad tech knowledge. So let's create a blog or a podcast. And then the next step was like, well, that seems pretty small. I should really create a business around a podcast or a blog. And then the next step was like, well, I should probably charge people. And then the next step was like, well, I should sell ads. And then the next step was like, hey, that's too small. I can't really hire people just to run my ads. Let's combine with some other people doing the same thing. So that's where AdTech God and Jeremy Bloom and I sort of refounded the company as a three-way partnership. And then I was like, well, now that we have a bunch of people listening to our podcast and reading our stuff, we could just add more of those, and it will be it'll be better for the people who we acquire, because instead of being someone's, side chase, or what's the report, side job, it could be their real job, and we can make more money at it. And so that's where we ended up. We ended up finding a lot of really interesting people doing interesting things, who were maybe not at the full potential of their audience and of their monetization. And so right now, just a quick summary, we have the Marketecture podcast that I host, the Marketecture newsletter that I write. The AdTech God writes a weekly newsletter called The Refresh, which is sort of like a news of the week kind of wrap up. Is really good. We have a social platform also called The Refresh, where we have a wonderful woman named Kate, who does like a weekly TikTok and Instagram thing. I know probably a lot of you are TikTokers from the looks of it. And then we've got the Monopoly Report, which is a newsletter and podcast that focuses on privacy, policy, and antitrust. We've got we acquired just a month ago a interesting website called adland.tv, which has got what we think is the largest repository of ads on the internet. And it's got something like 80,000 ads, mostly TV commercials from the Super Bowl number 3 to the present. And that's really amazing creative thing, because it has all these indexes. You can look up ads that have scuba divers in it, and just find a lot of them. It's like whatever you're interested in. And then this week's announcement with David that we're bringing the AI Marketers Guild and serial marketers, that Slack community into the fold. And and I'll just say that part of our belief is that one size doesn't fit all. Like some of you on this call may be really interested in like privacy and policy issues, and probably 90% of you could care less. And that's fine, right? That's why we have a different brand. If you're really into it, our colleague Alan Chappelle writes an amazingly detailed weekly newsletter on that subject. And if you're not interested in it, you probably find it to be the most boring thing possibly anyone could ever write, which is fine. And similarly, like this group is very concentrated. You folks probably know more about AI and marketing than most of the population, and other people are probably interested in joining. But it's not for everybody. So let's just, celebrate and invest in all of the interesting things going on in advertising and marketing, because it's an extremely large domain of knowledge and of people.
And it's amazing, even just like some of the folks you have involved, like Alan, I've known for a long time, and I actually love having legal experts on here because there's so much of that intersection of marketing and legal, and so having while I could promise the audience here and members that this won't be like all Marketecture people all the time, you do have quite a roster of folks, whether they're your speakers and fellow writers and things like that, and the stable that we should be tapping into, right? Like I would be remiss not to have insights like that. We did have one housekeeping question come in, and no, you don't need to sign up for anything again. We actually went back to our old email platform on Beehive that Marketecture is using, so hopefully everything this if you received the community newsletter this morning and the announcement yesterday, there will be a special Serial Marketers edition going out. Our weekly updates that'll probably go out tomorrow. But like everything should be looking, sounding normal. If you're not getting something or whatever, or something's off, just DM me. There are few kinks that always need to be worked out as migrate things, but I think fewer than usual from what I've seen, given how many times Ari's done this. So.
Yeah, we're also. I accidentally sent Todd a message instead of everybody. But yeah, we're not going to spam you. We didn't auto subscribe anyone to anything. If it was whatever your previous subscription was, it's still your new subscription. We'd encourage you to go to either marketecture.tv or marketecturemedia.com to see all of the things we have available and hit that subscribe button. YouTube as well, but we did not do anything to the mailing list except reorganize the existing ones to be more efficient.
So all this stuff, and it's like cleaning up sign-up forms and doing some stuff that, like, some of the housekeeping that I've wanted to do for years for some of these things. Like Eric could spot this stuff in a second and just be like, okay, now it's time. Any other questions so far, and just like how this all worked, or what you want to make sure we get into? It's like AI Insiders still moving forward. We got some great guest speakers, and actually got to give a shout out to Earl Richards, who was kind enough to have his slot bumped this week, when I was like, I promise you, if I'm bumping you, it is for something really, really good. So you'll see him next week, and already looking at starting to fill up July, since June's going to be bustling. But okay, this is actually a great one from Zach Rosdo, who's an amazing entrepreneur and founder in the gaming and advertising space. If someone wants to be interviewed in like across Marketecture's podcast, how do they raise their hands, or how can you find out about them?
Yeah, sure. We get inbound all the time. We don't say yes to everybody by any means. But yeah, just email. You can either email support@marketecture.tv or use the contact form on any of our websites. And then usually I'll direct that inquiry either to myself for my podcast, or ATG for his, or Monopoly Report accordingly. We don't have any very specific guidelines. It's much more about what we find interesting editorially.
So appreciate Earl playing co-host and adding all the links into the chat. So
yeah. But I would say, as a publisher of a podcast, I would just say, like, I get so many pitches that are like, hey, we have this mid-level executive who's an expert in analytics and would love to talk about the future. And it's like, come on, man. No, I just can't. Like, who wants to hear that? Especially it's like a white guy is 50 years old and is like had some VP of analytics title at like SAP for 10 years. Like, just don't pitch that. Give me something interesting. Tell me some news, anything.
Uh, and so Randall, go back to the 360i era with me. What are we looking forward to most over the summer? Why is it coming out with our own AI model? Well, I mean, all kinds of and Randall, like, careful about the Pandora's box you're opening here, because the number of people in this room who are working on AI models and will try to monopolize the rest of this conversation. Um, that is like look like, but all ideas welcome, right? Like, because we want to keep building here, we want to apply great uses of AI to the community, and still, like, just keep all that scrappiness going. Um, and I will say, like one thing way up on my wish list that I'll say publicly is getting a bigger kind of AI Marketers Guild themed in person conference event going, and working with a team like Marketecture that's done this really well. Like, they had an amazing, what was it, like a sellout kind of like standing room only event.
Yeah, we had our first event in person. It was sold out for 450 people in New York. It was the topic was chaos, which meant just change, and AI was part of that. We're going to do another conference in October. We haven't made a formal announcement yet, but you can probably count on that. We should decide if we want to bring some of this content to the stage there, or if we want to potentially have a separate, smaller, like AI centric meetup. I would love it if folks have ideas about, what they'd like to see in either a small meetup or a bigger conference on the subject. I know there are a couple of independent AI and marketing type conferences out there. I haven't been to any personally, so I'd love to hear from people what they think is good or bad about those. And also, if people are interested in speaking and they have expertise, that's also, an open door.
Yeah, we got some amazing folks here, and definitely, as I was like sketching out what that could look like, whether it's some people who've been past speakers on this series, and to folks who I know I'm dying to hear from, and folks who I talked to for the book. But oh, interesting. So yeah, it was great. And by the way, it's so funny. I didn't even know if Kate was in here. I almost called her out as one of those people who I've like a time to spend like Kate should host some of these. So it's just one of our best, most thoughtful participants. But Kate on the West Coast is asking, are things going on the West Coast or outside of New York in person?
Well, we've only had one in-person event, so and it was New York, so 100% New York. And the October event will be New York also. So I think we're likely to do something West Coast, but probably in 2026. We're probably booked for the year in 2025.
Yeah, and Jeremy is in Chicago. AdTech by definition is omnipresent.
Can we ask Kate a question? Like, what's the vibe among marketers on the West Coast? Because I constantly hear that the West Coast folks take AI so much more seriously than the East Coast folks.
Yeah.
I was at a dinner here in New York that was AI centric, and people left the dinner saying, "Oh my God, everyone hates AI." What's the vibe of marketers on the West Coast?
I think it's like there's two vibes because there's so much entertainment and content and, sort of union folks out here that there's a faction that is very hesitant. But at the same time, because of that, you have this really vibrant creators community that's blossoming out here, and that has just a ton of innovation coming out of it. So it's a little bit of two tracks, but, marketers kind of sit in the middle of content and, like ad tech and strategy and data and all of that. And so I think there's just a really flourishing kind of soup going on out here because of the content space.
Makes sense.
So I would highly recommend everyone to come out here and come to some events and check out what folks are doing.
There's an event called, I think, XAI that I think I'm going to in a couple months.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send you like a rundown of some of the things we have going on here, like AI on the Lot, AILA, and Machine Cinema, and Curious Refuge, and all these different folks.
And then in the Bay Area, I'd be remiss not to mention what Jeremiah Oya is doing with Llama Lounge, because Jeremiah. I think it's been he was the first speaker for serial marketers when the pandemic hit, and then he was the first speaker for AI Marketers Guild, and so he's my inaugural go to, and what he's done. And it is so funny though, because like like how serious it is, and and even just how many events he goes to a week. I'm like, God, that sounds, I don't know. I'm happy to get to pick and choose that here.
Yeah, I was gonna say there was just an article in the Wall Street Journal talking about how so many people are moving from Austin back to the Bay Area because the AI community here is just much deeper and mature. There's events every day. There's meetups. It's just much more collaborative.
And Chris, by the way, in the chat is also bringing up great point. Chris, who I have an email thread where we're working on scheduling right now, but Chris, who many of you know, is going to be one of our next speakers, and what he's been doing on like the like organizational transformation side is fantastic. And one of the themes that comes up a lot and questions as I've been giving a lot of talks past 2 months. I can't wait to get into with Chris, but I think that there's also some important bias to put in here, and my bias and bias that I want for this community is that humans matter, and how do we apply these things for growth and look at, as opposed to some what Chris is talking about of like, how do you do away with everyone and everything and just like destroy everything you've built and just like have a bot run it, and so and that's going to be pretty critical going forward. So Chris, I'll be looking forward to your thoughts on that. Like with all of the podcasts you're doing and things like that, like are there any kind of like overarching threads with like when AI is coming up, like sure. like where does it even come up in the conversation and why?
Yeah, I think that, and I've talked about this on the pod. There's like two contrasting forces. There's the one more obvious thing, which is taking an existing activity, workflow, or even a vendor and replacing them with AI. And you see that with the proliferation of creative vendors. There's God knows how many companies are saying they can replace creatives with AI, either partially, fully, or resizing, or, it varies the exact approach. They're trying to differentiate themselves from one another, but they all effectively are saying, we're going to make the creative function more efficient. And that exists for media planning and for reporting and for media mix modeling and all that. And I think that's fantastic, and go for it. And whether it's a good business or not is kind of a separate question. But the investment's happening there. And then there's the counter force, which is saying like a given discipline just shouldn't exist, that AI should replace media planning entirely. So optimizing media planning is a local optima, as I would say, and the real optima is to remove that step of the entire workflow. Basically, this is sort of Facebook and Google's point of view, which is just tell us what you want and you get what you want, and that's great. And it's a little bit of a return to the back to the future here, because in the 2000s, late 2000s, early 2010s, that was exactly what those companies were saying. And they got really beaten down for it because their money actually had to go through people in agencies, and those people in agencies didn't really appreciate the rhetoric that they were going to be replaced. But it feels as though it's back because it seems more possible. And I think there's also the case inside, companies where they're saying like, well, maybe this whole function shouldn't exist, or maybe they should be saying that more than they are. They're more in the first camp than the second camp, especially the big agency holding companies and other companies that are really invested in the media world. So I think that's kind of interesting. And I think we're seeing more results we're seeing mixed results. So there's definitely, like a duck paddling. You don't see what's going on, but like inside the big agencies, there's a lot of cost savings going on and a lot of efficiency that is being driven towards, lower costs on renewal and less headcount and things like that. I just saw a really interesting video with a friend of mine, Stefan Pretorius, who's the CTO of WPP. He was interviewed, I think, by the Financial Times. It might have been Bloomberg, one of the two. And he did like a 45 minutes or demo of everything WPP is doing for using AI. And it was, it's good to see they're doing something. There's stuff happening. So that's what I'm watching out for, is where you see these sort of glimmers of actual results from that actually change the way people do their jobs.
Yeah, because it's getting a sense of like what that looks like. Well, one thread that also has come up a lot. There was actually just a really interesting post by this an op-ed from a senior exec at LinkedIn and the New York Times is what it's doing to an entry level talent. Yeah, and not just in the ad industry, but like legal, paralegals, things like that. How much does this come up in your conversations, and how cataclysmic is this?
It seems pretty bad because the AI can really reproduce the work of an intern, certainly, except for getting your coffee. It could do almost everything an intern can. And then entry level employees are probably overpaid for the amount of value that they give, and then the AI, is able to replace half or more of their value. So yeah, I think it's a real problem. And it, like you said, it's not just in our industry, although, in a media planning context, for example, it would certainly be a big impact. That work, that cutting and pasting between spreadsheets and, creating reports for clients, all that stuff should be automatable. And that's going to hit the junior employees the worst.
Like, where is that next gen of talent going to come from?
Right. Yeah, so at this dinner, I talked about the one that was really depressing. One of the reasons it was depressing was because there were a lot of magazine and book people there, and someone made a very good point, which was that using AI, Stephen King could probably write a new novel every week, and it would still be pretty good. But that doesn't mean that you or I can create a Stephen King novel using AI. That's a different problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That got me thinking a little bit.
Well, and look, I tried this before, before I was writing my book without AI, of these, put in a prompt and a couple of docs and actually have books that are entirely written by AI. And I didn't read either of them cover to cover, but the bits that I did, I'm like, it's not far off from what I would have said. And if you don't know my writing to begin with, then that's full of a lot of personal stories and meandering and things like that. Then you might not think I'm that bad a writer from it. Not that I recommend it. This one was actually human written. Just
yeah.
Hey, David, if I may, really quick, I wanted to point out Earl's comment here about the fact that the AI can train junior talent. And yes, of course it can. It can be used in amazing ways like that. But this is actually why it's so important to have this philosophical discussion about the role of AI in our lives and in our work. Because if it is that it's replacing us, and that is the economic decision that a lot of COOs and CFOs are choosing right now, although we've seen what happened with Klarna now doing a snapback so quickly after seeing a quarterly drop in it. But it's that attitude of how do we use this technology to enrich us versus the replace us. And that's where I've been focused for the last several years, because we need to influence the decision makers today into the direction of a more sustainable economy and society. It comes back to the Henry Ford stuff around, I need to be able to pay my employees a living wage so they can afford to buy my product. And what happens when that goes away, if we don't have UBI or some other sort of economic support for the whole of society who's getting displaced?
Yeah. I could piggyback off Chris, but I think I'm new to the group. My name's Jim, and I've started writing a series of articles about the relationship between human beings and AI, and looking at all sorts of things. Since I'm a marketer, I'm really interested in how the AI companies are branding their assistants. They're branding their assistants anthropomorphically, as far as I can tell. And just that tension between human and machine, and what that means for future job growth, I think, can provide a lot of clues about which jobs are going to survive. and encourage people, to don't run away from the tools, master them, but make sure your mastery is unique, so you could do the creative stuff that you're hired for. And, it'll help you compete in a marketplace where there's both young and old talent.
And I just want to
I'll be listening in about, stories about that topic and hoping to follow up with some of you. Is that right?
Earl, you want?
Yeah, sorry. I didn't know if my sound is up or down. But I just wanted to add to that. I think that, to your point, David, when you and I connected, I think for me, I have a very strong bias as well between the relationship between the human element and the technology element. And for me, I look at it as a cyborg. Like, how can we use the human element and use technology, in this case AI, obviously, to help enhance what we already do? So I think that part of the biggest challenge that I've seen, just even talking to people who are in this space, who are very interested in seeing where this evolution goes, is getting the clarity and the perspective of I'm getting my job taken away, to how can I use it to do my job better, and not even my job, my personal life. So I think for me, I'm just always curious to try to better understand the, let's say, reluctance or the hesitation or the concerns. So just I'm in my bias, but I'm just very fascinated to hear that perspective, because I see nothing but green pastures here.
I think it's important to remember AI in its current state, we still need humans to come up with new paradigms. It's still derivative.
Yeah.
I agree, and that's the whole point.
Can I be heard first of all? Am I?
Go for it, Dorian.
Hi. So I have both hands-on experience with this, and I also see the glass half full and the glass half empty part. As some of you know, I come, a lot of it from what you might call the sell side, publishers, right? And, so on the very hands-on part of it, I've had your experience, David, where I've fed some of my stuff in and said, create something. And it's like, actually, this is not so bad. And what would have taken me 6 hours took this thing 6 minutes. And, so am I replaceable? And I've also had someone working for me who, was supposed to do dozens of social media posts over X amount of time. And she wasn't really hitting it out of the park. And I said, well, here's the stuff, here's some prompts, come up with the first draft on whatever it was. I think it was ChatGPT, and then we'll go from there. In the publishing world, the glass half full part is, I work with a fair number of local media publishers, and they're able to do things that, because of staff cuts and resource reduction, was becoming less and less possible. So templated stuff, weather reports, obituaries, coverage of local sports, with much less human resources. The glass half empty part of that equation is there's a quandary for these publishers of, these were the things we have used to train junior people. So, okay, we can, we need someone relatively, at least somewhat senior with some experience to edit the AI obituary, the AI weather report, whatever it is, right? It's less person hours, but we need a human. So if the junior person used to be trained in basic journalism by doing an obituary, but we no longer have human beings doing obituaries, how do we train people in journalism that, really does require human beings? Because that kind of original reporting is the thing that AI really doesn't do.
It's just also very funny, by the way, because what you are saying right now literally led to me being in this room and not another, because a sophomore year lit rec professor at Binghamton, who was telling me what it's like writing obituaries for years for Binghamton's Press and Sun Bulletin, scared me the hell away from journalism. And but it also made me appreciate those who actually love the craft and put in the work. Like they should be the ones doing it. That's a blowhard to me.
I mean, just to put an exclamation point on it, when you write an obituary, you have to call people up, you have to look at the data about them, and you have to craft that into a story. And those are the building blocks of how you do journalism, and you have to make a compelling case of who this person was in a somewhat deft way. And, so anyway,
and yes, we have cases like we had Sri Srinivasan on, who was talking about how AI was writing obituaries for him, even though he's very much alive. So
Yeah.
No, I've recently done some original reporting, and there's no substitute for original reporting.
No.
And AI can't find out facts that haven't been
But
done.
how do you train somebody? But Ari, how do you train someone who's junior?
Yeah.
To do that original reporting.
Yeah, I see with Dorian, because there's been a lot of talk about how AI might reduce, cognitive abilities that are going to be very important, critical thinking. And if you don't have those muscles, how could you be, a master of AI? Because in the end, it's like how you talk to the machine and knowing what questions to ask. So I think there is a danger there.
And
My brain's a lot softer. I used to know how to drive from my mother-in-law's house to the supermarket. Now, I got the Maps app, and I don't remember anymore. So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, GPS is something.
so I mean, just yes, you're right. Our brains are softer in some ways.
And the legal profession is struggling with the exact same thing, Dorian. Like, how do we train junior attorneys with the things that we would have given them to learn how to draft in a way that makes sense and is clear, but there are phrases that AI just doesn't understand what's behind them. Like, for the benefit of is an agency, right? But if you don't know that, you don't know that. And so we're struggling with the legal profession. How do you train junior lawyers?
Yeah, I think one of the factors, especially with software development, is that software development has historically been scarce and too expensive. And there's just an astronomical amount of demand for software that's been ignored because people say, oh, I won't build for that because it's too expensive or complicated. And I think that's probably true for healthcare, legal, and many other professions where and of course, you don't want an AI doctor, but sometimes you do want an AI doctor. And you're using better an AI doctor than a random page on WebMD that tells you you're getting cancer.
Yeah, well, I'd like my doctor helped by AI, right?
Yeah, right. So expansion of demand is one of the phenomenon here. But in some cases, maybe with marketing, there already is enough demand. And maybe people have enough marketing, and therefore improvements in efficiency will reduce the supply of marketing available.
Yeah, that is something we looked at. And I could share that article with you.
I mean, granted, there have been a couple of comments from Jim and Tamara and others in the chat too, as far as like, well, yeah, look at where things are going, where agentic AI is going, where like the volume of tasks that can be completed unsupervised. Even for anyone who's used deep research the past month or two and like tried to do anything like that 3 to 6 months ago, like deep research might not be original reporting, but when I wanted to compare senior living facilities for my mom, the number of sources that could be assimilated into this final report and like the inform, and granted, like things need to be fact checked, but it's like it's a different ballgame now than it was at the start of the year. And so what does the start of next year look like? It's a big question.
All learning comes through activity, interaction. We don't learn unless we participate. And it's the same thing with AI. So I've created some RAG GPT tools, and by interacting with it, I constantly come up with new applications of how to use it. So AI is a tool. As you say, with interns, it's also importantly critical that you have a learning process, because AI becomes powerful when you have domain experience and expertise. The human is always the one that's going to recognize whether something is of value or not of value. And that requires domain experience and expertise. And domain experience and expertise only comes when you are in the process of learning and doing. And that needs to always be part of the equation. To just replace people by AI, and you're going to use the conveyor belt that gives you new talent and new experience that can evolve into something great.
I tried something interesting last week. Everybody talks about writing prompts, so I thought, like, why don't I ask AI to write the prompt for me? I said what I needed. I go, what would be the prompt I would write to get this information? AI wrote the prompt. I then used the prompt that AI generated, and it gave me far more valuable information than if I would have sat there for 10 minutes writing additional prompts and asks from AI.
That's great.
But that came through experimentation. And then once you do that, you will find out that there's a number of other applications that you can engage with that you didn't think about. It doesn't stop there by you just creating a prompt with AI. And you still need to have the domain knowledge to recognize what is good and what is not good.
The other trick
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
The other trick that I like to use is I've set a system prompt that every time I put in a prompt, it asks me 3 questions. Tell me more what you mean about this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. And usually one round of 3 questions is good. Sometimes I ask me some more questions about my prompt.
It's and it's funny because like in in the book, but like when I wanted to distill the whole thing on prompting, it was just with 2 words: be curious. But Jim, to your point, the thing that I also wind up going back to all the time, and I bring up ad nauseum, is Toyota's 5 Whys. Yeah, and you're talking about that same process, right? Like it's just like get to the heart of this, and also I will add that one of my favorite prompts for things related to client work, or even when I'm doing like working on announcements, like how should I frame some of this stuff with Marketecture, I wind up talking to him about the start with why framework, and I'm like, do you know this book and framework? And like, of course I do. But like so if we rewrote this with the start with why approach, like what would that look like? And then what are the questions you need from me to understand why I'm doing this or why the company's doing this? And and it's like one of those things like, yeah, this book's been around a while, and like we all kind of get the gist of it, and it just helps recenter things instead of like the typical like some of the stuff isn't that hard. Like Jim, I'd ask him 3 questions. Like it doesn't have to be hard.
But notice one thing though. However you ask your question, AI is going to formulate the answer based on your question. You can have the same knowledge base and ask the question in 2 different ways, and it's going to formulate it for you in 2 different ways.
Yeah, which is why the real underlying principle of all of this is really important to make note of is precision with language. Mm-hmm. And in fact, one of the early things I learned with my mid-journey work, and I think I do pretty well with mid-journey and other stuff, some days better than others, obviously, but is that looking at the way docents at museums take blind people on tours of art museums and how they go about describing the artwork and that. And I studied a little bit, not as deeply as I probably should have. Maybe if there was a class, that would be kind of cool. But the underlying point's still the same. It's based on the fundamental computing principle, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So if you put better, higher value language in, you're going to get better out. Now, of course, GPT and Claude, and I believe Gemini as well, is actually doing a step of refinement on your query every time. Right. That's why it fixes your typos and the other stuff. But they're not doing it as often because there's an increased cost to it. So you could recursively continue to do that process, as somebody was mentioning earlier, and it is very valuable in that way. But it's about how do we balance the structured and unstructured data and information, which is also why we need to be careful on our own bias, because we can actually accidentally bias it with one word that leads the directions of the responses in a completely different direction that can be very myopic and harmful at the end of the day.
Though some of what you're talking about, it's like hard not to think about how relationships work, especially as the main LMs get to understanding more of your history, right? And so not that I'm saying anything personal experience here, but I might be, where in less healthy relationships, right? Like, it's like if you know if you say like, can you take the trash out this time? Like, someone will know. Like in a healthy relationship, someone will know you've had a long day or something, and just like you know what, they actually haven't done this in a while. If it's a less healthy relationship, it's like, well, that sounds like really shitty way to phrase and ask this kind of thing, and then you wind up in a half-hour conversation about your prompt and not about like, can you just help each other out, like do each other a favor, and so but there's some of this too, where as these engines know where you're coming from, right? Like, then then if you've had that bias all along, right? Like if you're and if you're always picking the image of the male CEO and not the female one, or you're always like just looking at these like much harsher responses instead of more diplomatic and like social, like emotional learning tinged responses, like it's going to know that's what you want, and give you more of that. Chris, to your point, even like all the unintentional training that you're given, and you might have been given that training for the past year, and now all of a sudden it's like gone from like a 3-year-old to a 13-year-old, where it could pick up on that and start being like, oh wow, now it's going to start using this against you whether you like it or not. So
Yeah.
but this is also why it's also so much fun to have a big crowd today. We're seeing people coming from a lot of different angles here, and I'm looking forward to, as we get back to some more pointed topical things like Earl's how to stuff, to Chris's like how teams work together and things like that. Now where AI fits in as part of the team. Yeah. All this, it's going to be really fun to have a lot of these voices in the room, and also hear more about who you want to hear from. Like I saw Catherine Montgomery pop in, Brooks Marsh, Kate Cook, like all been just great contributors here, and folks who I met in large part through the community, and can't wait to have more of those kinds of perspectives surface.
What we like about this, as much as anything else, Dave, is your not only your personality, because it trickles down from you, your openness, your ability to say you don't agree with something, and the safe debate that this environment relies on. We're not trying to impress each other as much as we might be doing with clients or people we're working with. I think there's a kind of a free form. This is what I'm feeling. What do you think? And you're going to get someone who disagrees. And the reason why I bring it up is I literally have been using on all of my prompts, building them into my my rules, is don't just believe my bullshit. Please question not just my prompt, but literally what I'm saying to you, and kind of start from scratch more often, and don't build up this, hey, this is my point of view. I'm an energetic guy that wants to be positive. Well, not always. And just this group is that for me.
A lot of that is that, ChatGPT at least has been designed to flatter, and make you feel good. And now they're taking action on that. But yeah, I've written numerous things for ChatGPT to evaluate, and they're always glowing, and I have been asking, can you be honest with me?
Yeah, you have to
more.
Yeah, you have to be able to. I prefer to use custom GPTs or GEMs, whichever platform you prefer, but you have to train it in the same way you would train an intern or anybody talking to you. If you need that constructive feedback, that critical feedback, just to make sure that you're not being quote unquote gaslighted, then you need to train your AI to do that. In the same way you would need to train your staff to be honest with me and keep it real, keep it 100, as the kids would say, is the same thing. If you get rid of the idea that this is a tool and a team, premonition for my talk next week. The idea is that you need to train in the same way you train an intern. So if you need that critical feedback, literally ask for it, and it will.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes your intern is drunk.
And you have to deal with that too. You worked in agency life, worked in Mad.
You just don't know when.
Usually 7 a.m. on a Wednesday after a big Tuesday night out. So
tacos and tequila, but that's where you had to make sure, hey, are you drunk right now? I want to make sure your head is on straight. I need to do some reporting right now. It's the same concept.
as we hit the hour mark, any last questions for Ari, for me, anything we'll still be here next week, like still be maybe even more responsive in Slack, and it's possible and stuff like that. So like, you're still gonna get emails. Sun's gonna rise tomorrow. Geo?
Yeah, I think, since I'm muted group, I'm wondering what the next few sessions might be like if you already have that designed.
Yeah, well, and
it would be great. I could read ahead of time.
And the best way, I even have to check if like any of them need updating right now, because some things like get from my calendar. We have a wonderful assistant, Ellie, who helps me with a lot of the actual publishing. But if you're not already following the Luma AIMG page, we'll keep using Luma. You'll see a lot of the upcoming events there, and there will be a few more scheduled. We even have a couple in-person things happening during New York Tech Week with the week of June 2nd. That is just New York. But as I know there are a couple other tech weeks going on. If there are folks that have ideas for things in different cities, like please reach out. And
yeah. Oh, I have a question. What's the best way to reach out to Ari?
I'm very easy to reach. Ari at marketecture.tv, Ari at aripapero.com, support at Marketecture TV, accounts payable at Marketecture TV, accounts receivable at Marketecture.
Complicated.
Well, I mean, this is so much damn fun. I'm just glad that I know, whatever's happening for a while, I'll get to just continue hanging out with all you folks and keep building on that. So really, like, for Ari, Jeremy, I know AdTech got it to go and get the next pod ready. But all this, it's just like this is just one of the most fun things I've ever gotten to do. So glad to get to keep doing it and building on it, and look forward to all your ideas and participation. So thanks all you.
Thanks everybody.
Hey, thank you.
Cheers. All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.